The morning sun had barely climbed above the city skyline when a single photograph changed two lives forever. It happened in the quiet corner of a luxury office where no one expected a miracle. A powerful CEO reached for a worn-out leather wallet that had accidentally fallen from the pocket of a struggling single father. One faded childhood photograph slipped onto the polished floor. The moment she picked it up, the color drained from her face. It was a picture of herself at 6 years old, standing beside an old oak tree she had not seen in over 20 years. Her hands began to shake, her heart raced, and for the first time in years, the successful woman who controlled a billion-dollar company felt like a frightened little girl again. She looked at the single dad with tears forming in her eyes, realizing he had been carrying her forgotten past all along without ever knowing it. Before we continue this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who still believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Enlightened Story. Your support helps us continue bringing heartfelt stories that remind the world compassion can still change lives. The single father was named Julian Reyes, a hardworking maintenance supervisor raising his 8-year-old son, Theo, alone after losing his wife to a long illness 3 years earlier. Every sunrise meant another battle against unpaid bills, school expenses, and endless overtime. Julian never complained because every sacrifice was made with one purpose: giving his son a future brighter than his own. Although life had stolen many things from him, it had never taken away his honesty or gentle heart. His wallet contained very little money, an old family picture of his son, and one mysterious photograph he had carried since childhood without fully understanding why it mattered so much. The CEO, whose name was Adriana Wells, had built one of the country's most respected technology companies after overcoming unimaginable hardships. To the public, she appeared confident, fearless, and impossible to break. Yet every birthday reminded her of one unanswered question that haunted her entire life. At the age of 6, she had become separated from the people who had cared for her during a devastating flood in her hometown. The disaster destroyed homes, scattered families, and erased countless memories. She survived, was later adopted by a wealthy family, and eventually achieved extraordinary success. But she never stopped wondering about the strangers who had risked everything to keep her alive that terrible day. Holding the photograph, Adriana quietly studied every detail. The little girl wore the same blue sweater she remembered from old dreams. Behind her stood the giant oak tree near the river where the floodwaters had risen. But what caught her attention most was the handwritten note on the back. The faded words simply read, "Never forget the little sunshine we promised to protect." Her breathing became unsteady because those exact words had echoed through her childhood memories for decades, though she had never known who wrote them. Julian looked confused as he explained that the photograph had belonged to his late grandmother. She had discovered him as a young orphan after the same flood and raised him with endless love. Before she passed away, she had given him the photograph and told him that someday he would understand why it was important. She never explained where it came from or who the little girl was. She only asked him to protect it forever because it represented a promise that should never be broken. As sunlight poured through the office windows, long-forgotten memories slowly returned to Adriana. She remembered being trapped on the roof of a small wooden house while heavy rain swallowed everything around her. She remembered a frightened teenage boy carrying her through freezing water while refusing to let go despite the dangerous current. She remembered an elderly woman wrapping both children in warm blankets inside a tiny cottage until rescue teams arrived the next morning. She had been evacuated during the confusion, but the names of the people who saved her had disappeared with time. Julian suddenly realized the truth as well. His grandmother had once told him about rescuing a frightened little girl with the help of her brave grandson. That grandson had been Julian himself. He had only been 11 years old, too young to understand the importance of what happened. Years later, after the trauma faded, the memories became scattered pieces of childhood. The photograph had remained the only silent witness connecting their lives. Neither wealth nor status mattered in that extraordinary moment. Adriana looked at the exhausted single father standing before her in his worn work clothes and understood that the person who had unknowingly saved her life decades earlier was now struggling simply to keep food on the table for his own child. She felt overwhelming gratitude mixed with sadness. All her achievements suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the quiet courage of the man who had carried a stranger to safety without expecting anything in return. Instead of offering charity, Adriana chose something far more meaningful. She personally promoted Julian into a leadership position within the company after recognizing his years of dedication and exceptional work ethic. She ensured he received advanced training, better pay, flexible hours, and educational support for Theo. Julian accepted, not because he wanted favors, but because it allowed him to provide a stable future future for his son through honest work. Their relationship became one built on mutual respect, gratitude, and shared memories rather than obligation. Months passed, and Julian's life transformed in ways he never imagined. Theo finally joined the science club he had dreamed about for years. They moved into a modest but comfortable home filled with laughter instead of worry. For the first time since losing his wife, Julian smiled without forcing himself. Adriana also found healing. The mystery that had followed her since childhood was finally complete, allowing the painful emptiness inside her heart to fade. She often visited Julian and Theo during weekends, not as a CEO, but as a lifelong friend whose greatest success had nothing to do with business. People inside the company noticed something remarkable. Acts of kindness began spreading naturally from one employee to another. Workers volunteered together, supported struggling colleagues, and remembered that every person carried a story hidden beneath appearances. One forgotten photograph had quietly changed an entire workplace because it reminded everyone that compassion always creates ripples far beyond what we can see. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with your loved ones, and tell us in the comments whether you believe one act of kindness can change someone's entire future. Your support encourages us to continue sharing meaningful stories with the world. Special request: before this story ends, please comment the words, "Kindness always returns," if you believe every good deed eventually finds its way back to the person who gave it. As the warm afternoon sun shined across the city, Adriana placed the old childhood photograph inside a new frame and gave it a permanent place in her office. Beside it stood another picture showing Julian and Theo smiling together on the day their new journey began. The faded photograph had once represented unanswered questions and forgotten promises. Now it represented hope, gratitude, family, and the incredible truth that even the smallest act of courage can echo across an entire lifetime. Sometimes the greatest treasures are not hidden inside vaults or boardrooms, but inside old wallets, worn memories, and faithful hearts that never stopped keeping a promise they barely remembered making. And that is why, no matter how difficult life becomes, kindness is never wasted. Because one day, when the time is right, it always finds its way home.